got 4.5 hours of sleep. Do I love the decision that Anne makes at the end of this novel? I fell asleep. Made it. This might be too old now to do 24-hour reading challenges. And what is our relationship to our parents? What is our relationship to friends and to being different? Is also done so masterfully. Happy Halloween. It's Friday the 31st of October, and welcome back. I'm so excited that you're here. We today are kicking off my first ever 24-hour reading vlog. Now, here's the caveat to this. I have to work. I have to work overnight. So I have to go into work at about 12:30 a.m. and I will work until 7:30 a.m. So I should be home a little bit before 8 a.m. So the goal is to do a 24-hour reading vlog from around 11:30 p.m. or midnight tonight, which is Friday the 31st, until whatever time we started 24 hours later on Saturday. Now, I'm not going to sleep during that time, but here's why. Because I'm working this overnight shift, and usually for me, my body cannot, I work overnights every once in a while, but usually it's an overnight shift that ends at 3 a.m. So I am back home by 3:30 and, 3:30, 3:45, and I am to bed by 4 a.m. Usually I can sleep until maybe 10:30 or 11, and that's it. My body sort of won't let me sleep beyond that. So I don't have a lot of high hopes. If I do get home tomorrow morning, so today's Friday, Saturday morning after I work, if I get home at 7:30, 7:45, and I go to bed at 8 a.m., I don't have high hopes that I'll actually sleep. So instead, I don't know if this is gonna work, but we're gonna try. I have a meeting this afternoon. It's about noon, it's probably closer to 12:30 right now on Friday afternoon. I'm gonna try to sleep from 4 p.m. until 11:30 p.m. and then get up, get ready, go to work. I don't know if it's gonna work. We're gonna see. But if that can work, then I really will not be sleeping for that 24 hours that we're gonna be doing this reading vlog. I will have to work, so that takes away the 7 hours. But from whatever time I sort of wake up, I'll start listening to an audiobook as I get ready to go to work. I will go to work, and then I'll come home and just stay awake and be reading that the entire Saturday. I'm taking care of my sister's dog tomorrow, so I also do kind of have to be awake for that. Maybe she'll take a little nap at some point, and then I can take a nap too if I'm tired. But the goal is just to start tonight with an audiobook, listening, and then just continue and read straight through. So that is the plan. That is the goal. I have no idea what the TBR is yet. I will be back with you with an update for that. I am excited to kick off our reading vlog. It's a 24-hour reading vlog with no sleep, but a break for work. And it is, 12:40 a.m. So I didn't really get to sleep until 6 p.m. and my alarm was set for 11:30. So I feel okay. I'm off to work. I'll be there until about 7:30 a.m. But excuse that I have no makeup on. I will put that on in a sec. But we're gonna see how it goes. Hopefully I'm not dragging too much. I have been listening since I woke up to Anne of Green Gables on audiobook as I showered and got ready, and I'm really liking it. So I'll give you more of an update because I gotta head to work now, but I think that's what I'm gonna continue listening to in the car. And then when I get back, my sister's dog will be here, so we'll give a little doggy check-in and we will go about reading. All right, I'll talk with you in just a little bit. Anne of Green Gables. I listened to it on my drive into work and then my drive home from work this morning, It is now close to 9 a.m. I didn't get home until about 8:30 or 8:45 a.m. I finished at work at about 7, but then, or yes, about 7:30, but then I ended up chatting and they were giving breakfast because we were doing this long holiday weekend. So everyone's working crazy hours this weekend. And so they're giving different free meals throughout. So I ran and got the breakfast and then ended up sitting and chatting with a colleague. So didn't get home until a little bit later, but I did finish my first book of the vlog, which is Anne of Green Gables. I had just a little bit left of it when I left for work. So it is now all finished and I really enjoyed this. I've never read Anne of Green Gables before, and it's always one that I was thinking that I should or that I wanted to check out. And I can see why this is a really beloved text for so many people. And especially, I think if I had read this as a young person, I really would have been even more enamored with Anne. I am very much enamored with her character. This is a book that, if you don't know the storyline, it is essentially just a story about a girl named Anne who is 11 years old and she's an orphan, and she goes to live with a brother and sister, Marilla and Matthew Cuthbert. And at first they do not want to keep her because they asked specifically for a boy and they didn't get a boy, and they're going to send her back. And then she's just so charming and really vibrant in her personality that they end up keeping Anne on at Green Gables, which is the name of the farm where they live. And it's just a story of Anne growing up in this area, having a best friend who lives down the road from her, going to school, growing up, and this follows her from when she's about 11 until I think she's 16 and a half is what she says at the end of this novel. And at that point, she's gone away to school for high school. She's contemplating going away to university. So there's a really great kind of growth in her character. She goes from this really impetuous, she's got a little bit of a temper as a kiddo, and then as she grows up, she sort of learns these lessons, and I can see how this was something that a lot of young children would be very drawn to. And I can see in another timeline where there could have been a million Anne Shirley books, and there could have been all of these adventures and just these little moments. It really does follow in such a beautiful way this growth of Anne, but what's really amazing is the writing and the reminders that this text gives us to take pleasure in the small moments and appreciate not only the nature around us, but just what it is to be alive in a lot of ways, and to appreciate interpersonal relationships and appreciate personal growth. So this is a text that definitely does give a lot of positive values, and yet at the same time, you really fall in love with Anne and you want to follow her adventures, and you see the growth in her in a really great way. Now, do I love the decision that Anne makes at the end of this novel? No. Do I see why the author made that decision? Yes. And there are sequels to this, and you could have written sequels either way, whether she made this decision or not. But I do think that the decision that she made feeds into continuing with the characters that are here in this world that Lucy Maud Montgomery has created. So that is Anne of Green Gables, done and finished. I think I'd give it a 4. There were a few moments that were racist, and that definitely leaves a bit of a sour taste in my mouth. So I do just want to mention that. And I do think that is something that's a challenge when you are reading older texts, and it is something that I have a privilege of often being able to sort of skim past, but for others, that may not be the case. That is something that is an interesting question. What do you do with older texts that have some disturbing, outdated language that is potentially very harmful to those who may be picking up this text? So something to think about for sure. And maybe I'll put some thoughts together at some point, and we can kind of talk about that. But anyway, I am ready to pick up another book now that Anne of Green Gables is done. We are continuing the 24-hour reading vlog. If you hear some whining, that is my sister's pup. Dia, you want to come say hi? Come here, baby. She's down here. Well, anyway, I'm going to pick up another book. I think I'm going to read physically for a little bit longer. I feel okay. I didn't get a lot of sleep yesterday. I tried to sleep. I went to bed later than I should have, meaning I tried to go to bed at 4 p.m. in the afternoon, and I didn't. I went to bed at 6 p.m. and woke up at 11:30, but according to my Aura ring, which did actually track my sleep, I thought it didn't, but it did actually track it, I got 4.5 hours of sleep. So we might need a nap later, but for right now, I'm okay. The book that I want to start next is To the Moon and Back by Eliana Ramage. And this follows a woman named Steph, and it follows her ambitions to become the first Cherokee astronaut. And then it also follows her sister, who I believe is a social media influencer. It follows their mom, and then it follows Steph's college girlfriend. This is sapphic, or at least has sapphic characters. I don't know if there's a specific love story in this text, or if because it says it was her college girlfriend, I don't know if it's sort of a current relationship or a past relationship that we're following. But I am excited for this one because I did read Atmosphere, which is, of course, the other kind of sapphic astronaut story that's out there right now that people are really loving. I liked it. I didn't love it. It kind of left some things lacking for me. I'm not a huge romance person, and Atmosphere was very much a romance in a lot of ways. It was a romance with great historical context, but I think because it was so much a romance, it kept me a little bit separate. And this, I think, maybe will go the opposite direction, so I think I may really like this one. I'm checking in. I fell asleep. I don't know how this 24-hour reading vlog is gonna go, but we're trying our best, and I'm giving myself some grace because that was a weird work shift that I had to work today that I don't usually have to work. So it makes sense. I didn't get a ton of sleep yesterday, even though I wanted to. So I'm chipping away. I think my brain is working a little bit of overdrive while I'm dealing with lack of sleep, but I did want to come on and give you a little update. I made it. I'm a little tired. Okay, I made it to about a third of the way into To the Moon and Back. So I made it to page 131, and I'm liking it so far. It tells the story of Steph, who is the Indigenous young woman who we're following, and we start when she's, I'd say, around middle school age. Maybe, I think she's a freshman or maybe 8th grade. Well, I guess she's applying to go away to school, and she's really hoping to get into a prestigious high school. So I guess it's just before she starts high school, and then we follow her through high school, and then eventually right now she's in college, and her one ambition is to be an astronaut, and she is an Indigenous woman, and her mother has taken her and her sister away from a negative situation. Her mother removed them from that situation and brought them back to the Cherokee community in the hopes of being able to find this belonging that she is sort of looking for. Their mother is very protective of the girls, and to the detriment a little bit of Steph and her sister. They are sort of working through their mother's identity to her Cherokee heritage, and they're trying to find their own as well. Steph wants to be an astronaut, is her number one ambition, and she's working towards that throughout her high school and into her college career. Then we start also getting a perspective from Della. Now, Della is another Indigenous young woman who Steph meets and starts dating in college. Della has a lot to process because she was adopted by a white Mormon couple. What's tricky is that when she was adopted, her biological father, who is Cherokee, reached out and tried to gain custody of her. This then became a huge community event where the entire Cherokee community in this area was also working and campaigning to have this child returned, because the hope is that Cherokee children will be placed with, in an adoption situation, placed with Cherokee families, and in this case, replaced or kind of given back to her biological father, in the hope that the Cherokee heritage can sort of continue on. The children can be taught where they come from, they can be taught their heritage and all of the traditions that go with that. So what's interesting is that Della, but when she was a child, was news headlines. People know about her at this point. And there was an author's note. I guess that section is based on a true life story having to do with the Indian Child Welfare Act, which was hoping to have the Cherokee children or any Indigenous children remain with their community. So Della is recognized by people in the Indigenous community, and they will sort of ask her, "Are you Della?" And she actually is only Della. In that context, her adopted family call her Emma. And so there's this interesting, when she gets to college, she keeps her last name from her adoptive family, but she does return to Della as her first name. So her story, really interesting. And then I'm also really identifying with her struggle to come out in the midst of a really religious family. So I am liking it. I think it's moving a little bit slowly. I think it could have been edited down. I don't think that this needs to be an over 400-page book. I think that there are interesting sections that are really strong, but then those sections don't stand out as well as they could because there's a bit of fluff added in where I just don't think we needed this additional description, or we didn't need it to move so slowly, particularly in the very beginning. It is picking up pace a little bit more at this point, but I do think it could have used a little bit more editing. But so far I'm liking it. I'm enjoying the writing. And I do think that this is an interesting companion so far to Atmosphere, if you read Atmosphere recently. But this is very much more so far a coming of age tale rather than a romance, although there is a romance right now as Della and Steph are getting together. I'm curious to see when we start following the mom and her sister Kayla, because Steph's sister, because I think we're going to start getting specific perspectives from them. And Kayla is an interesting character, so I'm interested to dive in and see. She's sort of taking a different path than Steph in a lot of ways, and I'm curious to see kind of when we get to her perspectives as well. So I think I'm going to keep reading now. I don't even know how many hours I've actually read today. I mean, I tried. When I got home, started reading 9:30 or so after I updated you, then tried to read until about 10:15, 10:30. That's when I fell asleep. Slept until 12:30 or so, 12:30. Read a little bit, had a lunch break, read a little bit more. Now I am going to pick it back up and continue. I think I'm going to set a timer for an hour and just like dive in and see how much I can get read in an hour. So that's what I will do right now, and I will check back in with all of you a little bit later. We may just have this one book today, and I think that's totally fine. Well, that was a bit of a failure. I was really enthusiastic and really hopeful that I would be able to make it a full 24 hours. And that was definitely not the case. After that last clip that you saw, I basically slept and then just was a zombie the whole rest of the day. My sister ended up coming over. I could barely function. So we're gonna have to try again at some point. This is way too hot to drink, actually. But for now, I think it's many days later. I think it's 2-3 weeks later at this point. But I do want to still finish up the book that I was reading so that we can sort of wrap up this challenge. And eventually, maybe I will try another 24-hour reading vlog when I'm not working, when I don't have to work from midnight until 7 a.m. or whatever time I had to work. And also maybe I just might be too old now to do 24-hour reading challenges in college. I could stay up 24 hours, sure. Multiple times I had to because my papers were always late. Or not late, but just right on time. I was just late getting my work done. But now I think maybe that's past my abilities. Anyway, I have a meeting in about an hour, but other than that, I have nothing else to do for the rest of the day. I worked this morning, so I am free for the rest of the day. And I do want to get this video posted up tomorrow on Tuesday. And so in order to do that, I do want to kind of wrap things up. And I want to do that by reading or finishing up To the Moon and Back by Eliana Ramage. And I am on page, let's see how many pages I have left. 170 pages, if I'm thinking correctly. This might be completely wrong math. But 259, so about 50 more pages to 300, and then about 120 beyond that. So about 170 pages or so, give or take. So we're gonna see if we can bang this out and get as much done this afternoon as possible. The other two books that maybe I'll include if I can, I have two books that are due back to the library, And that is The Boyhood of Cain. I need a real bookmark. But The Boyhood of Cain, which I'm almost done. I have about 40 pages left. And I am really enjoying this. The Boyhood of Cain is one that I just found at my library. And it's essentially just a coming of age tale. This book really follows one boy and his childhood. His father is let go from his job. His mother is dealing with a lot of depression. He is trying to figure out who he is. I'm sorry if that's frustrating. Let me see if I'll just bend it in half so that it's not sticking out so you can still kind of see the book. It's not going to be even now, but there you go. Is that better? There's a really interesting perspective that our main character narrator has, and we get his mindset, but in a way that is not stuck in a childish or overly childish mindset. It's a very intelligent child, but not to the point where, you know how sometimes you read this and you're like, well, that would never actually be what a child thinks. This does feel realistically like a precocious child, or like a very in tune with the world child. So I am really enjoying this and I want to finish it up. There's not a ton to talk about with the plot because it really just is his daily musings on his life and the perspective that he takes as a child, trying to understand what is our relationship to religion? What is our relationship to our parents? What is our relationship to friends and to being different and to being looked at as someone who's not in the norm, so to speak. And I'm really enjoying it. And I think it's really well written. It's very compulsively readable. And I sat down and read a lot of this just in one sitting, and I'm excited to just finish this up. And then the other book that is due back from the library tomorrow is Drowned Country by Emily Tesh. I read Silver in the Wood by Emily Tesh and really loved it. It's basically about a man named Tobias who lives in the woods, and he's sort of a caretaker of the woods, and you learn more about the magic system. He is a part of that magic system. You learn about his history and sort of this legend that he has become a part of in the woods. And this is the sequel to that. This one, I believe, follows Henry, who was Tobias's love interest in the first book. And they did seem to come together, but it was left a little bit unresolved. Now Henry is getting a summons from his mother, who is a really great character. She herself is this renowned folklorist. She's kind of given Henry his drive to study folklore and study magic systems and the history of these woods. But Henry gets a summons from his mother, so he's going there. So he's leaving the woods, going to his mother to help her with, I think, a missing child. But of course, Tobias is going to be there because Tobias, who is in love with Henry, and Henry seemed to be in love with Tobias too at the end of the first novella, they are going to, of course, kind of have to be back in the same environment. So I'm really excited to pick this up. And last time I just sat and read the first novella in one sitting, and it was really quick. So I think what I'm going to start with is I'm going to start by diving into a little bit of To the Moon and Back, because that, of course, is the one that we want to finish up for that 24-hour reading vlog. But then we're just going to sort of read as much as we can this afternoon. So although it's not a full 24-hour reading vlog, we're picking up. We're going to read as much as I can with one quick break for a meeting that I have to do, but that is nothing like going into work for all that large section of time. After I read a bit of To the Moon and Back, we'll see if I feel really invested in it. I'll just keep reading. If not, I would love to get into Drowned Country and also to finish up The Boyhood of Cain. So those are the reading updates. I will check back in with you when I've made some progress. I loved this. I think this is so masterfully done. This is the author's first novel. He has written some short stories, but this is the first novel, and I'm so excited that I just found this in my library. I don't think it was ever on my radar or would have been on my radar. And so I'm so excited that I read this because I will absolutely be looking to see what else this author writes. The way that he captures childhood is pretty phenomenal. So often when we get a coming of age tale, it's someone looking back on their childhood and giving a perspective, even if it's a narrative perspective and we're not following a true character. Even in a fictional sense, we're sort of hearing from the older version of the character looking back on childhood. We are dropped into this boy's childhood. His name is Danny, and we are dropped into Danny's childhood. Danny doesn't know what's going on because he's a child. He's dealing within his family, alcoholism, depression, some not so moral situations that are happening among the adults in his life that go into a realm of child abuse in various ways. He himself is very neglected as a child, and yet because Danny doesn't have the answers to this, we don't get the answers to this. So our adult perspectives, we're reading this, and it does take us a moment to realize, or at least it took me a moment to realize, oh, this is what's actually going on, to the extent that it really is quite neglectful, quite traumatic. Danny himself questions the world that he's dropped into in various ways, and yet he doesn't have answers. There are not adults around him that are giving him the answers that he needs or that even care to be thinking about who he is. So the way that this drops us into childhood and puts us back into that place of what it was like when you were a kid, when the whole world feels like it revolves around you and you could only look at things from your own perspective. So for example, when Danny's mother is going through this really dark period of depression, he can only view this from the perspective of how it impacts him and how it would or will impact him in the future. And I think we all have that in childhood because that's how our brains function. And it's only in being forced to grow up and forced to come to an adult mindset that we move beyond that, and we start to realize as we gain more experience and we see how the world functions and society functions, we see that we need to look beyond just ourselves. But Michael Amherst, the author, does not veer away from that. We are very much in a child's mindset. And Danny is struggling. Danny is a late bloomer. Danny is questioning sexuality, which is also done so masterfully because Danny does not have any specific labels for himself. He doesn't have answers. He has some questions, but he also this is how he looks at the world. And there's very little specificity about exactly what is going on with Danny's sexuality. The author has previously written about bisexuality in another book or essay, potentially. I believe it is a nonfiction book. So it's called Go the Way Your Blood Beats on Truth, Bisexuality, and Desire. And I do assume that we're meant to see Danny as bisexual, but it could kind of veer into a few other options. And of course, there's no need to say that this is exactly what's going on with Danny. And I think that that's the point. For me, that aspect of being almost obsessed with various people without realizing why is such a telling and really fitting exploration of sexuality, particularly of sexuality that does not fit the heteronormative society that we live in. And it was really well done. The final moment of this book was very beautiful and it'll stick with me. It'll stick with me for sure. Now, I don't think it's perfect. I think that there are a lot of different storylines that do not necessarily get wrapped up in that final moment. While it was so beautiful and perfect, I don't think that it wrapped up the themes of the novel that we were following as the majority of the through line. Although this is a book that I do want to, this is from the library, I want to get my own copy and I want to reread it, because knowing now where it's going, I will read from the beginning with a different and new perspective. Lots to say here. If you love character studies, if you love coming of age, if you want to be immersed into a very interesting perspective and narrative style, I would absolutely recommend picking this up. And it's very readable. Short chapters, it does delve into deep topics, but done in a way that reminds you of how you yourself as a child, if you had any deep topics that you were dealing with in your family as a child, or if there were any traumatic experiences that happened to you, this puts you back in that mindset of what it is like to be a child and suddenly have to be forced to grapple with very deep and intense situations. So I would absolutely recommend this. Also, look how beautiful this cover is. It is so fitting, because Dani is someone who's looked at as sort of weak in various ways, a little bit soft, and to have the lamb and then to have this kind of childhood crayon mark to try to cross out that lamb, cross out that symbol of weakness, that symbol of also innocence, because a lamb is very much tied to innocence. I just think it's perfect. I really enjoyed this. This is a 5-star read for me, and I can't wait to see what else this author comes out with. The writing is beautiful, really beautiful. Absolutely recommend. Please do check it out from your local library, pick it up. I really enjoyed it. All right, I'm gonna go have my meeting, and I'm gonna also change into some warmer clothes. It's cold. It's really cold today. I think it's the coldest day that it's gonna be this week, and my house is an old house, so it's cold. So I am going to go put on some warmer clothes. I'm gonna go to this meeting, and then I'm gonna keep reading.
Well, friends, my reading plans were all over the place for this vlog, so bear with me. I think I have soft-DNF'd to the moon and back at this point. I just don't want to pick it up. I did start Drowned Country, and I'm really enjoying that, so I'll give a review of that in an upcoming vlog. But thanks so much for following along on this failed experiment. I learned a lot, and sometime I will try again a 24-hour reading vlog. If you have tips or tricks, please put them down in the comments. But thanks so much for being here and for watching. Have a great rest of your day, and happy reading.